Okay, welcome to episode 1 of Coach's Corner with Justin and Ethan. I am Justin Schollard with my handy co-host here.
Ethan Wolf.
So quick little 2-second backstory. Why don't you kick us off, Ethan, on who you are and, what your why you might be qualified to talk about health and fitness.
Absolutely. Well, as I just mentioned, my name is Ethan Wolf. I've been a fitness professional since 2006. That's when I graduated with a sports science degree. So
Mhm.
that's when I can click as official, but went right into fitness after that. I currently own a studio for private training in West Hollywood called Howl Fitness. And I've also been a massage therapist for over 12 years. And my whole life, I've just had a passion for the body and movement, but kind of in more eclectic ways.
Mhm.
Never played sports, but used to do old time feats of strength from old time strongman, like ripping phone books and ripping decks of cards.
Yeah.
Love to dance, have a huge mirror in my living room for dancing.
Huge mirror in his
Hand,
bedroom
yeah,
for
the other kind of dancing. And yeah, but hand balancing practice, just all that kind of fun stuff. So I've always had a passion for the body. Was into parkour for a while, and getting to express that passion through my education and to help other people has just been really, really awesome. So that's kind of like the fitness kind of component of things. And then, yeah, I think I also have, I've done a lot of spiritual thinking. I used to study Buddhism in college and read, a few spiritual
Mm.
texts. I'm by no means am scholarly about it, but I think I look to get into the human condition. And I think between working with many clients, I'm always trying
Mm.
to put myself in other people's shoes,
Mhm.
kind of step out of dogma and,
Yeah.
blinders
You're
and
very
thinking.
unconventional in that sense.
Yeah,
Not to say
absolutely.
you won't get under a barbell and do some back squats and good old fashioned training or anything,
Yeah.
but you've always had much more of a alternative approach to fitness and lifestyle, which I've always appreciated.
Yeah, and I would say, generally a heart-centered person, so
Mhm.
always down for a good hug, and I think all that is just, how I participate with the world and help people step into better versions of themselves.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you? Who are you?
I'm probably more conventional in a lot of ways, I think. And the reason is because I think one of the topics we're gonna get into today, we're gonna talk about intermittent fasting, and we're gonna talk about the pros and the cons and who it may or may not work for, and is it really necessary? And whenever I dig into topics, because 'cause I'm just as susceptible to anybody,
Wait, but who are you?
I'm getting there.
Oh, okay.
I'm getting there,
Just wanna make sure.
to want to kind of veer off course, for lack of a better word. Not to say that that's a bad thing.
Right.
But then I always find that sometimes the tried and true approach is kind of the way to go in a lot of ways. And so I've been doing this got certified when I was 18 as a personal trainer. Visa sent me a credit card for 500 bucks. I maxed it out day 1, got a certification. Here we are now. We've owned gyms together. We owned a
Sure
CrossFit
have.
gym for 8 years.
Yep.
Been
We
a
actually just met
trainer.
last week, so
Yeah, I just met this guy. He's like, "Who's this?" Oh, he's the oh, shit. Anyways, no. But, and so now I have a company called Carbon Fitness Method where we work with healthcare professionals and build custom nutrition plans and exercise plans and accountability mainly. Anyway, so my style is definitely a little bit more like I want to know the numbers,
yeah.
like I want to be able to see progress and make informed decisions from what the data is telling me. And so I've always been much more of a progressive overload. Like, let's look at how many calories we're eating and is that working or is
Yeah.
it not? Let's look at, training protocols and let's map it out and track progress. Are we getting stronger? Or are we not? Are we seeing results? And it's kind of letting the info guide my decision making. However, now though, I'm really excited that you and I have come together to record this show.
It is exciting.
And basically, what we're going to be doing, guys, is each week we're going to do our best to break down a popular diet, training plan, fad, idea, concept, what have you,
Yeah.
documentary, book, whatever kind of
Person.
hits the person.
Yeah.
And we're going to try to be objective. And I want us to be your resource for information
Yeah.
where we can maybe distill some of the mumbo jumbo, run it through our filter of 20 years of experience in the industry, working with thousands and thousands of people, and then give an honest analysis of,
Just, yeah,
is this going to work?
bridge the gap a little bit,
Yeah.
take some science, take some personal experience
Hmm.
and kind of reduce it down, give our own opinions and just,
Totally. Yeah.
make it a little digestible.
So, with that said, let's jump in, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right. So, what are we going to talk about today, dude?
IF,
So,
intermittent.
if,
If we're going to talk about if.
if,
So the origins of the word if.
If.
No, we're gonna talk about intermittent fasting. Very popular dietary trend. I think everybody's probably heard about it at this point, or most people, not everybody, clearly. But
And what you may not know is I think that we all understand intermittent fasting conceptually where it's like, okay, intermittently, I'm not going to eat.
yeah, everybody's probably heard of like 8 hours on, 16 hours off. That's the
Right.
classic model that you hear about. Sometimes you hear about a 10-hour on or a 6 hour on,
Right.
you know.
But there's
But
other ones that are like 5 days of just like normal eating
yeah,
and then 2 days of like what we would consider ultra restrictive calorie eating, where you'd only eat
yeah,
like 500 calories a day for 2 days after 5 days of normal eating. And then there's another one that's alternating where you would eat normal one day and then the next day, 25% of your normal calorie intake. And that would
right,
be another form of intermittent fasting.
right.
Have you ever done intermittent fasting?
I have both unknowingly and intentionally.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, there was a time, probably in early 20s when I first moved out to LA where I wouldn't eat breakfast, not really a morning person, go about my day, probably eat my first meal sometime in noon-ish or later.
Mm,
And, you know, I came to realize after learning about intermittent fasting that I was probably eating in an 8 hour window.
hmm.
And so that was by accident. But then I've also done it intentionally where I've set specific hours that I've chosen to make
Right.
sure I only eat. What about you?
Well, to that, I think that that's kind of common. I think that
Yeah.
like, I bet you there's a origin of intermittent fasting that just started with people just having a natural propensity to just not really be hungry until late after or late morning, early afternoon.
Yeah.
I've tried it, but I'm like the opposite. Like I want to eat like not
Same.
right away, but definitely within 2 hours of being awake. Like I'm
You
hungry.
get the hunger, yeah.
hmm And so, but like everybody else, maybe 5 years ago or 4 or 5 years ago or so, like, it was everywhere you looked was intermittent fasting.
It popped out
Yeah.
and was very
So I gave it a whirl.
yeah, why not?
Yeah, it was cool. I
No,
mean,
it's
like the
not that
thing is
hard.
that, and this is what we're gonna dig into because we've researched a couple of, I think, reputable sources,
You know, but we're gonna bring some science in a
and
little bit.
what I experienced was the same as what is being reported that the fall off rate is really high
Yeah.
because it's just it's human nature to want to reward yourself after something hard, as Dr. Hugh from Harvard Medicine says.
Mm, it's true.
Therefore, after, you know, after not eating for 16 hours or only having 500 calories, like the temptation to want to like overeat is really strong.
Yeah. I mean, I think we were just discussing about how it's like
Mhm.
those days where you're just super busy. I'm sure we've all had one where you don't mean it, but you just haven't really eaten all day. Might not
Mhm.
happen very often, but I know for me when that's happened, by the end of the day, I'm just daydreaming about racks of ribs and
Right.
burgers or eating a whole pizza or just like dumplings. I'm just like, my mind is just
Yeah, you're obsessing.
fantasizing about the most
Mhm.
delicious, scrumptious meal that I can eat. All bets are out the window at that point.
It's like a monk being shown porno
Yeah.
who hasn't had sex in 10 years.
You know, a little bit of discipline. I guess that's a good analogy.
It's like, yeah, I haven't eaten in a day, and I'm on Instagram, and it's just like food porn. Just like
Oh man,
obsessing over
watching like
this.
YouTube videos, like
Yeah.
steak searing. It's yeah, but it's I think that something I talk about with clients. Like we always make the worst decisions when we're hungry,
Yeah,
when we're on a
never
plan.
go grocery shopping hungry.
Yeah, we all know that, right? I see you got all the
Mhm.
snacks and everything in there,
Mhm.
so it's understandable. I think that if you go with an extended period of time without eating, you're gonna have to kind of fight that fight when the time comes to eat again.
Yeah, definitely, and yeah, when you've abstained from eating, whether it's 16 hours or you just come off of 2 days where you're only had 500 calories,
Yeah,
you're gonna be in an emotional state most likely. You're probably gonna your inhibitions might be just a little bit
yeah.
lowered anyway. So that was one of the big
Well,
things.
let me ask you this: do you think intermittent fasting is a good option for weight loss?
Okay, well,
Broad
okay,
buckshot.
yeah. I mean, here's what I think about it. Right, I think of it as, is it a good plan, end all be all plan
Is it a good
for
option?
somebody?
Is it a good option?
I mean, it's hard to say yes or no,
It doesn't have to be yes or no, but I think is it
but
just
I think that it's a tool in your tool belt.
yeah, I
I
feel
think
that.
that it can work for certain people,
Yep.
but I think what the studies show when they've tracked participants over like a 12-month period, at the end of that 12 months, very few of them were still sticking with it.
Yeah.
It's just it's like
So you're seeing an adherence issue as a primary downfall.
absolutely,
Yeah.
right? And that's probably stands true for most
I was
diets.
gonna say, yeah, so I think, like, is intermittent fasting really special in that sense, or is it more
I think that the problem with intermittent fasting is that you're missing the overall point of how and why your body is losing weight.
right.
And I think it can mislead people to think that there's something unique or magical or special
Yeah.
about it when fundamentally the same exact results happened with people who just did a general calorie restrictive diet.
Yep.
So
Totally. Yeah.
it's a vehicle, it's a
Yeah.
tool. Is it the end all be all that like you can sort of rest your hat on and never
Yeah.
have to worry about gaining weight again as long as you eat an 8-hour window? No.
No. Yeah, I was thinking about how to answer that question. Is it a good option? I said it's not the best option, but it's not a bad one.
It works.
It works.
It does work.
And to that point, right? So I'm looking at a study in the New England Journal of Medicine, and they basically tracked people, obese clients, for a year,
Hmm.
and have them, the study basically was intermittent fasting and classic calorie restriction. And net data showed that after a year, there was basically zero difference.
Yep.
And so when there is adherence, fundamentally doesn't show that much difference. And then, to that point of that intermittent fasting is really just introducing less calories than you need, and therefore you're going to lose weight. I found another study that basically said when there's no intervention, intermittent fasting does all the good things, lowers, reduce body fat, increase insulin resistance, all the good stuff. But then compared to calorie restriction, that's measured and controlled, was not as good.
Mm,
So even though it's working on the same mechanism of reducing overall calories,
got you.
if you did nothing, intermittent fasting is going to take you in the
So
right
there is like
direction.
marginal benefit just by purely eating in
Yes,
a shortened window, regardless of calorie
yes.
restriction.
That if you did nothing versus intermittent fasting, you're going to have net benefit over all of the different factors.
Hmm.
But if you were to actually do a structured calorie restriction where you're measuring, doing your macros, all
Hmm.
that stuff, that's going to be even better than intermittent fasting based off the studies I was looking at.
And I guess that's kind of the big takeaway with a lot of this stuff. I'm looking at Harvard Health EDU, and you're looking at New England Journal or whatever.
Hmm.
And they're all kind of saying the same thing, that when you actually map it out and you look at like a controlled group of people that participate in nothing at all, life goes on as normal,
Hmm.
calorie restriction, and then a third group that's just doing intermittent fasting, this the calorie restriction group and the intermittent fasting group kind of got the same exact or similar
Yeah.
benefits,
Yeah.
right?
Either similar or less than classic calorie restriction based on what I was able to find.
So then I guess it kind of begs the question then,
Yep.
for intermittent fasting to be successful, there needs to be a awareness of how many calories you're consuming and sort of a way to like measure how many calories you're actually eating throughout a day anyways.
Yeah, I think that will guarantee it's successful, right? And so I think just to iterate, big takeaway is calorie restriction or not eating as many calories as you need is fundamentally the way we lose weight and change our
Hmm.
body composition, whatever the avenue is, whether keto or otherwise, doesn't matter. And so intermittent fasting is just a way that that's happening. And so to your point, I think knowing your calories and all that is going to be extra helpful to make sure. But at the same time, I think it's also, the idea that something is better than nothing,
Hmm.
right? That even if the person measures nothing, doesn't do, how much energy they're using and their total daily energy expenditure and all this stuff, that
Hmm.
as long as they do some restriction, it's still better than nothing,
Mm.
right? So I guess this for me is like, why do you think we're like a kind of a question of like why do you think intermittent fasting can work, or like who's it applicable to, right? Because
Yeah.
fundamentally we know that calorie restriction in some form works. So why would somebody choose intermittent fasting?
Right.
Like what populace, who
Okay.
falls in the
Here's who I
category?
think it would work well for. Two situations that right off the top of my head would be, we'll take my fiance, for example, take Tanya.
Yeah.
She's a good example. So Tanya is, you know, starting her own business. She is taking business dinners like multiple times per week. And as we all know, it's very difficult to be in a calorie restrictive diet if you're going out. That's
Yeah.
like the hardest thing to do. There is a way to do it, and we can talk about that in another episode. But like fundamentally, like you know how it goes. It's like you're at like any sort of nice restaurant, any sort of major city, and it's like, all right, well, chef recommends 2 dishes per person. It's
Mhm.
family style. Next thing you know, there's just this like lazy Susan sort of
Potatoes
rotisserie of
soaked in
like
butter and
dishes, and you don't even know
fried
what you're eating.
seafood and delicious things. I mean, yeah.
So it's difficult to know. And so tracking calories, you can try,
Yeah.
you can budget for a certain allotment of calories for dinner, but you're kind of taking a guess. So I think in that scenario, skipping breakfast, only having a good lunch,
Mhm.
having like a good solid lunch so you're not starving for the rest of the day, and then allowing yourself to just, be mindful, but not weird at the dinner table. You can
Yeah.
still enjoy yourself. I think that would be really good. And then also I think for traveling, it's really good.
Interesting. I could see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking somebody whose bandwidth is pretty much already full and is already kind of like cooking their own food, right? So if obviously I'm not somebody that's eating fast food, but let's just say a single mom with 2 kids. Let's just throw this random out. And the bandwidth's full. Not a lot of room on the plate to do more things.
Can't
But
cook different meals for their kids and
yeah, just you
yourself.
just
And
to
yeah.
pull out a food scale and to track every day. It's just that's it's impossible, but not a lot of bandwidth. But she's already doing home cooked meals and they're balanced. Let's just say she's
Hmm.
already in that boat. I think somebody in that situation would benefit from just putting themselves in a window because they're already cooking their own food, right?
Hmm.
Let's just assume they're cooking a somewhat balanced meal most of the time, not just like
Hmm.
eating cereal. I think somebody like that could just use the simplicity of just here's my window to eat to create a calorie restriction for themselves so that they don't have to overload the system and they don't have to put too much thought in it, but they can still get the benefits. So that was somebody I was
I think
brainstorming
that's
an
definitely great.
idea.
Yep, exactly. And I think too, like if you if you eat whole foods, single ingredient foods.
Yeah.
What are single ingredient foods?
What it sounds like.
Proteins,
Yeah.
grains, rice, veggies, right? So if the recipes you're making are single ingredient, and it's not this like huge crazy pot of whatever, but it's a little bit more straightforward, and then you did that in a intermittent fasting window,
Yeah.
you're probably not going to overeat.
Yeah. I
It's
mean,
very
that's what I'm
hard
saying.
to overeat
Realistically.
if you
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. Well, so in that capacity, before we get into the where I think it can fall off, like what do you think are the benefits of intermittent fasting? Like what, because since we're kind of saying like who's it working for, what are the benefits? And I would say this can include anything from why it works for these people to like the specificity of the actual fasting component.
There might be like a psychological benefit of just practicing restraint
Okay.
that could apply to other areas of your life.
Interesting.
So you're not just constantly indulging in instant gratification whenever you feel like it. "Oh, I'm hungry, I'm gonna eat. I'm hungry, I'm gonna eat." But you're like, no, I'm gonna allow myself to feel hungry and
Yeah.
trust that I'm hungry. I'm not starving.
Yeah. No
I'm just
harm being
hungry.
done. Yeah.
And it's like some personal discipline, right?
Right.
So I think that's a benefit of it. But again, I'm looking at this stuff and I'm like, it doesn't really seem like there's a huge y- like benefit to time restricted eating versus just
Well, I guess
calorie
benefit.
restricted eating in
I mean,
general.
that's in the why it works. Is there benefits to applicability?
To your point, maybe if you have like a really crazy busy morning and it's just better to just not even try.
Well, I mean, that's such a black and white thinking. I mean, does not even try with a busy morning. I mean, for
Try to
me,
eat breakfast, I
I'll try to
meant.
eat
Yeah,
breakfast.
yeah,
I was
not even
like,
try to eat
I was like, oh
breakfast.
wow, that's
Just
really
give up
dark.
in life, guys.
Just
Take
call
it
it
from
quits,
us. We've
man.
seen it. We've seen everything. We've
Just
realized that it's all hopeless and it's
lock
better to
yourself in
just
the
give up.
closet.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I
Um,
think for me, it's like one of the things that a benefit is that it's minimal thinking.
yeah.
You don't got to think about your calories. You don't got to think about your food
Hmm.
scale and your tracking app. It's just boom, it's right there. It's
Right.
just, Other thing is that there's variability from person to person in your eating window,
Hmm.
right? You can make it variable to your job. Maybe your eating window is 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Hmm.
or maybe it's 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. So I think the simpleness of it and the variability from person to person is I think just in a practical sense something that it makes it accessible.
Yeah. And I think to the benefit also is like a lot of folks want to feel satisfied. And so,
Mm.
newsflash, if you are trying to lose weight, you got to eat less food. If you eat less food, that means there's probably going to be this like background hum of
Mhm.
hunger.
Yeah. And that song you wanna listen to, can't
Yeah.
wait till you hear it.
But I think just anecdotally, like animals are most dangerous when they're hungry.
Mm.
We're more our mental acuity sharper.
Oh, yeah.
We're more alert. Look at like
100%.
a pride of lions after they eat.
Yeah, that's
Blood
it.
all over their face, right? But when they're
Totally.
hungry, they're like, they're on the hunt. They're hunting. And so I do
Yeah.
think it puts us in a more maybe like, primal hunter. I'm gonna go and kill what I eat kind of mode, figuratively and literally.
Yeah.
So I think that's a benefit. Like
Yeah,
you
that's cool.
can
I
be
didn't think about that, but
sharper.
I've definitely heard people talk of like,
Hmm.
go get her, go get them. People that are like, I like being hungry,
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
because
Yeah.
it's that sharpness. I don't get
Right.
bogged down. I'm not distracted. I don't even care about the food. I want the hunger. It's
Hmm.
interesting.
Yeah. And then also, I forgot what I was gonna say.
No, it's one of the things I was actually curious about. So fasting, one of the things we were talking about before the podcast was the benefits of fasting, because there are separate benefits to fasting outside of calorie restriction. Obviously, fasting is coming from extreme calorie restriction, but outside of just like weight loss, things happen when you really do a fast where you really don't eat that don't necessarily happen if you're eating less calories by 10 or 20% a day kind of thing.
Hmm.
And a key coined word you hear a lot potentially is autophagy,
Mm.
right? So autophagy is like the body's recycling program,
Hmm.
and it basically starts to break down like junk proteins. So you can kind of think about like old shingles on your house or your old roof that gets worn. And it's kind of like removing the old shingles and putting in fresh new ones.
Hmm.
And without ever
Yeah.
going into autophagy, we never really break down those proteins and those cells in our body. And they even say that in extreme periods of fasting, like cancer cells are considered bad proteins or bad cells. And so autophagy will actually like attack cancer and
Mm.
odd things like that. So obviously, the deeper you go, the more autophagy will happen. It's also a survival mechanism where your body is basically eating itself to
Mhm.
survive,
Mhm.
but it's a good thing. Clean things up.
It's like a regeneration kind of process,
Yeah, and
right?
apparently the 16-hour window does allow for a moderate amount of autophagy where you can kind of look at it as cellular maintenance,
Hmm.
which I didn't think happened, but when I actually did some digging, apparently it can occur in a moderate way.
And autophagy doesn't happen if you're just, let's say, in a 15% calorie deficit.
No, because you're consistently introducing food.
Hmm.
And the idea is that your body has to be without calories for an extended period of time.
Hmm.
To me, what based on my research is that what I thought like true autophagy, which I would still say starts at about 24 hours. So if you were to do a 24-hour fast, no calories whatsoever, your body really kicks into gear. And it's kind of the same with like being in a, ketosis, similar.
Hmm.
Ketones are a way that if you actually have ketones in your blood, that's a way to kind of signify that you are also doing autophagy.
Hmm. Interesting.
So, but I thought that was interesting because I didn't think that actually occurred from the 16-hour window. And what I would say is that that probably would definitely occur from like the 5-2, where you have 2 days of 500 calories, that
Right.
you would probably almost definitely go into autophagy in those 2 days.
But
And
the irony, though, is then we'll also, have these consultation calls with people who they're in not great shape
yeah,
and they have weight to lose. And they're like, I only eat once a day. I'm not hungry for more. And that's just kind of my normal routine. They're not exercising.
right.
Their their lifestyle's not great, but they've gotten to a point either through depression
Hmm.
or just whatever that like they're just not hungry and they don't eat. And then I think kind of the less you eat, the less hungry you feel because your metabolism is dropping to compensate.
Yeah,
But then that would be an interesting juxtaposition because you could look at somebody who might eat 6 meals a day, but trains and dials proteins and carbs and everything in. They're in great physical condition than another person who only eats once a day, and they might have more of the process of autophagy happening
yeah, but
theoretically, but they're
theoretically.
not necessarily the poster child for good health either.
No, autophagy isn't like the be all end all. It's just a benefit of fasting.
Yeah.
I don't think we don't want to throw
Right.
the baby out with the bathwater to say
Or
that
do
like
we?
being fat is great, having extra weight. No, but being fat is great to get autophagy. I just think that there's a component that there is a benefit to autophagy in the body.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay. I
And
hear
that
you.
it's not, obviously like having a good body composition is going to be a healthier option. eating 6,000 calories in one sitting to actually be obese for eating
Mm.
one meal a day or overweight and having the potential benefits of autophagy. I just think it's one of the knick-knack paddywhacks that could happen from intermittent fasting that wouldn't from calorie restriction.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's worth trying. Like it's not like there are diets where I'd be like, don't do this.
Yeah.
It's stupid. You're missing the point. With intermittent fasting, it's like, listen, you can still hit your proteins and your carbs and your fats. You can still keep your calories tight.
Yeah.
Like if you're, intermittent fasting curious, I say just do it and see if you like it.
That's the thing, especially if you're not doing anything else. And I think that's, you're saying like carbs and protein and fats. I think that's one of the things where I see the potential, which we've kind of danced around of intermittent fasting going wrong,
Yeah.
is that it doesn't actually create a food plan.
And that's where it can go wrong.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you're just simply, you know, choosing a window to eat. But if you're still eating McDonald's and a full Domino's pizza and
Right. Like
drinking a bunch of
don't
liquor,
fool yourself here.
right?
Like
Yeah. So it's like that's the thing is that like it's almost like the only plan is time,
Mm,
right? And that saying, if you don't have a plan, you plan to fail,
mm-hmm.
right? And so it's a plan in the sense that I'm creating a time structure for my pattern of eating, but that's the only plan. There's
Mm.
no plan of the actual what you're eating. And I think that's where the shadow with it lies.
Right. So on the one hand, you have people who just did a calorie restrictive diet, which we know studies out, guys, it's less calories than you eat. We had a study that we have a group that just did that and a group that did intermittent fasting. The group that did just calorie restriction got better, if same if not better results than
Yep.
intermittent fasting.
Yep.
Okay, so the upside is comparable than just any calorie restrictive dieting, whether you eat 6 meals a day or 2.
Yeah.
However, the downside where it can go wrong is fundamentally just like there's nothing magic about this 8-hour window.
No, that's the
If
thing.
you
Yeah. It's not
if you
that's
if you smash 6,000 calories in 8-hour windows, by the way, if you're a bigger dude, it's not that might sound hyperbolic when I say 6,000 calories. You guys are like, oh,
oh
who eats
man, those
6,000 calories? Telling you, like,
fat laden foods, man.
go to Cheesecake Factory and look at their menu. One meal could have 2,400
100 calories.
calories.
Yeah, exactly.
The
And I think
fettuccine.
and I think this is
It's
where,
insane.
we were saying before, like the autophagy point is just a tidbit, but that doesn't
Right.
matter if all this other madness is
Right.
happening within the window.
Right.
If you're slamming a 12-pack of beer and getting all those calories plus eating a cheese, it's easy.
Yep.
It's not that crazy.
Or even if you're just slightly over. So maybe you're doing intermittent fasting, but you're eating 3,000. Maybe your body can only really metabolize 2,500. And so it doesn't feel like that big of a difference, but you're not seeing any progress and you kind
Yeah.
of continue to gain weight, which is probably more likely the case.
Mm-hmm.
Then yeah, there's nothing magical about it,
Yeah.
So I guess that's my point is that since for it to really work, you still have to know your calories.
And know what you need too. Cause I mean, I think it's also like if you ate an 8-hour window, but you ate only like cereal and bread,
Yeah.
it's like that's not going to serve you very well, especially if you're like exercising, again, without the plan of food,
Hmm.
eating the wrong foods, eating too many foods. And I also think there's an opportunity that is that you're going to eat too little,
Hmm.
right? Like under eating to
Right.
too much of a degree is also not a good thing, right? You don't want to eat 800 calories a day. It's not sustainable. It's
And if you're
not good
if you're
for your
and if you
nervous
don't
system,
exactly.
cortisol levels,
Right.
right? And so it's like if you have this limited window and you're at work and that puts you to only have lunch and you bring your, like a salad with some grilled chicken on it and you had 550 calories for the day and now you get home and it's outside of your window because there was traffic and you're like, well, you're disciplined. You're like, I'm here into it. I'm not going to eat. And now you've only eaten 500-600 calories in the
Mhm.
day. That's not going to serve you very well either. So I also think that there's a potential for under eating.
That's a great point, and I think that I could see a scenario where somebody who doesn't who hasn't spent any time developing their intuition and their analysis around calories,
Yeah,
and they're just that would be attractive than to just do intermittent fasting because I don't have to go through this process of understanding
exactly. Yeah.
how to count calories, and so, okay, this makes sense to me, but I could see it where you're so fucking hungry that you go eat like a 1,000-calorie lunch that's like lasagna, and it just gives you crazy indigestion,
Yeah.
and you're just like, "Bleh," and
Yeah.
you're just like, now you just wiped out your appetite for the rest of the day, and you've only had 1,000 calories all day long.
Yeah,
To your
exactly.
point.
So,
Yeah.
and I think it's like that whole thing of like what you were kind of saying before of like we making the worst decision when you're hungry. I think that's another thing is that like when you do a calorie restriction, you can do 6 meals, you can, plan your food so that you're never actually that hungry if you do it right. Whereas, like, I think facing hunger is kind of like you can look at it as discipline and being sharper. You could also
Mhm.
look at it as like reducing quality of life. Like animals
Yeah.
don't like being hungry, right? And so there's a
Like,
component of
there's a
like,
reason there's a
yeah,
instinct to, like, be on the hunt.
yeah, right. And so I understand, like, if
Yeah.
you're on that level, so to speak, where you're like, I like being hungry, I want the sharpness, and there's the benefits of it. But you could also look at it as like hungry is kind of like a form of suffering. And you can get into the contemplative philosophical aspects of life is going to include suffering and being okay with suffering and negative states and all that stuff, which I'm totally about. But at the same time, we're averse to those things for a reason. Sitting there being hungry all the time might not be really enjoyable. And that might not be the right way to challenge
Yeah.
negative states.
Especially if someone, let's say they do run a busy life
Right.
and their mornings are really busy, and maybe you can only work out in the morning. And so now you're in this situation where you're constantly running on E.
Hmm.
You're really busy in the morning. You're trying to get the kids off to school. And then, or you go and you do a 6 a.m. workout. You come home with the kids and you're just like hungry as shit. And you're like, I can't eat till noon. Can't eat till noon.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And
It's
it's
like
like, man,
there's
that's unnecessary
that's
suffering. We're just,
exactly, like, there's a component where, like, you might
right.
have enough on your plate that the challenge of life is already the challenge of life, where you have unavoidable circumstances where you can start to
Hmm.
have to choose to accept and meet that moment with grace, so to speak.
Yep.
But to then self-inflict long periods of hunger might not be the thing you need in that moment.
So let me ask you this then.
Yeah.
Okay, let's button this up with this. So if you're gonna do it, which like I said, I personally think
Okay.
there's nothing inherently
Yeah,
wrong
it's
with
a
it.
tool. I think you had a great line in the beginning. It's
It's
a
a
tool in the
tool.
tool belt.
Yep.
Perfect.
If you're gonna do it,
Yeah.
how do you do it right?
I think first things first is with anything is cook your own food primarily, if possible, right? So just as a fundamental thing is cooking your own food. Two, because you're able to cook your own food, having some type of food plan,
Mhm.
right? And just understanding in some way what kind of macros you need. Again, macros being the macronutrients of carbohydrates, protein, and fats. And so just having a baseline understanding of what that looks like. And to maybe run through what doing your macros is, run through how many calories you need and what an appropriate restriction is, and like a template, like a model, use intermittent fasting to match that model, and then you're kind of done with it.
Mhm.
That's kind of the way to keep the idea of it being a simplistic approach without just diving fully into tracking your macros. Because if you're going to just track your macros, you might as well just track your macros,
Yeah,
right?
forget intermittent fasting.
Yeah, forget
Yeah.
intermittent fasting. So if you're
Right.
gonna do it, then maybe it would be to do like a half plan to get a general direction of the compass versus the exact roadmap and
You
apply
just
it.
go calories only. Like,
You can
okay,
just do calories only,
I
yeah.
need to eat 2,000 calories. I'm gonna do it in 8 hours. And that means that's basically two 1,000 calorie meals.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. You get a TDEE calculator
Mhm.
on them,
Mhm.
get a general idea. So I think that would be it, is like to just still cook your own food. Because I think even then, I think even if you only cooked your own food and did no numbers at all, then you just made sure it was a balanced meal. I think we all understand probably what a balanced meal
Mhm.
means, not cereal for every meal or that kind of
Milk,
thing.
cereal, and
Peanut butter and jelly, that's it.
peanut butter.
But I think if you have balanced meals and you cook your own food and you were doing intermittent fasting, I think that would still work.
Yeah.
I think so. I think cook your own food first, get some type of an idea of what's going on, and then just use that to understand how that falls in intermittent fasting, and then don't think about it anymore and just use intermittent fasting for its simplicity.
Yep, I agree. I think going after, okay, framework is you want to do intermittent fasting. Let's just use 12/8 as an example because that's probably the most common.
16
So
8.
16/8, excuse me. 12, I'm thinking noon, noon to 8
Oh,
p.m.
noon to 8. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
my
So
bad, my bad.
16/8 is in like 16 hours fasting, 8 hours eating.
Context matters.
It does. So we'll use that as okay, so that's the model that you guys want to do. I would say, to your point, I agree. If you don't want to even think about having to track calories, then just eating single ingredient whole foods, not the grocery store whole foods, but whole foods is in just like single ingredient
You
foods.
can like
Google it.
fundamentally
Yeah.
recognize it by looking at
Yeah.
it.
You can see what's on your plate. That alone is going to prevent you from overeating, whether you do intermittent fasting or not, by the way. But then you got to go after the food. You need to know your numbers. Like if you're a 25-year-old guy who trains, if you undereat, your workouts are over. It's ruined.
Yeah.
All your gains are gone. So you got to know like how much you should be consuming. You don't want to overeat. You don't want to undereat. And then once you kind of dial in food choice and some parameters around calorie targets, then just cram it into an 8-hour window. Voila, there you go.
Easy enough.
That's how it can work. And if you wanted to do it right.
Yeah. And I think that's the truth of it, is that, you could get all the benefits like the autophagy and all that, the potential of the discipline and the sharpness of the hunger, and calculate exactly what you need in the window, and kind of double down.
Right.
Okay.
So let's rate this bad boy.
Ooh, this is an interesting. So we're doing it out of 10.
1 to 10.
1 to 10. And I think we can
Ethan's rating.
include. I think we can include points, like half numbers.
Yeah.
7.3 or whatever. I don't think
That's oddly specific.
Well, I mean, at least 0.5s, but I
You
think
better justify that 0.3.
I just think it gives a little more nuance. I think sometimes at least by a 0.5, I think would be helpful.
Fine. Half points count.
All right. I'm gonna go with a solid 7.
Mm.
I'll go with a solid 7.
Okay. Why are you a 7 instead of?
I almost went 7.5.
Yeah. Well, you made a whole stink
I
about
well,
the half
that's
point,
I was
and then
I
you didn't even
but
fucking use it.
well, I mean, I'm just setting the stage.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just
It's
laying
okay.
out the groundwork.
7. Why 7?
7.3. I would say 7 because it works.
Mm-hmm.
Fundamentally, it works. The studies show that if you apply intermittent fasting versus nothing, you will lose weight, get the benefits of calorie restriction. So it fundamentally works. It's not dangerous for the most part. Again, the undereating potential is there, but it works for losing weight. It's simple. I think it's available to most everybody, meaning that like you don't have to eat a certain type of food. You don't need a food scale. It's just really widely available. It's simple and applicable, and it works. So
Mhm.
that's why I'm giving it a 7. Is there other better things? For sure. There's a lot of shit that's below it too.
Sure.
So that's where I go 7. What about you?
I'm gonna be a little bit more controversial.
Mhm.
I'm gonna give it a 10.
You
No, I'm
give
kidding.
it-
No, I'm kidding.
I was like, wow.
I'm
you
gonna
know.
give it I was gonna say 7 too. I'm gonna say 6.5
Okay.
because I just think there's a lot of room. There's a lot that I just don't want people to think that there's anything magical about it. I think that the reason it works in certain situations is because you're already applying a calorie restriction
Totally.
and having to kind of understand your baseline. So I think that, to your point, there's a huge risk for undereating. There's also a risk for like kind of reward behavior where you're hungry and you're making maybe a not great decision because you haven't eaten
Yeah.
for a while and you might overconsume. But on the other hand, I do think it's a tool. Like if you're on vacation and you got dinners out every night, it's a
Yeah.
great option to just skip breakfast and only have your lunch and that dinner. That's going to probably keep you within parameters in that instant.
Right.
However, and
No mimosa until
yeah,
it's
until
time.
noon.
Yeah. Or well,
So,
vacation,
hates
vacation.
so listen, I don't hate it, and like, to your point, it's safe. It's not. There's no risk here other than maybe just
The
unintentionally undereating.
undereating, and that I think would probably be a more less people would probably fall in
Yeah.
that category, but still there.
But and then also when back to this Harvard study, almost half of people fell off. It's hard to
Yeah.
stick with it consistently.
And I guess for me, it's like I think that's like that with any type of meal.
That's probably true.
So I just don't know if I would single out intermittent fasting for that reason.
So do it, give it a try,
Yeah, I think it's worth a
take
go.
a crack at it, but
Like I
don't.
said, I mean, it's what I say here is like it's basically like something better than nothing. Is what I
You're
would say.
trying, you're starting the process. You're probably not. I could see a lot of people letting that be like a great like gateway.
Yeah,
diet.
I think the barrier of
Mhm.
entry is low. And I think if the barrier of entry is low and it gets you on the first step of the journey,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm all for it.
Right.
Right. I don't think it's going to be the end game. It's not the best tool.
You're gonna find yourself naturally just wanting to try something different. I think.
Yeah. It's like almost like anything. In the beginning, it is what it is. But as you get better, you dive deeper.
Mhm.
And I think if you were losing weight or changing your composition in some way more and more seriously, you'd probably end up diving deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
There you guys go. So
let us know if you do give it a try, if you've done it.
Yeah.
And let us, what's your opinion? What do you think?
Email us at Coach's Corner with Justin and Ethan on Thursday afternoons in losangeles.com. Just kidding. We don't
Yeah.
have a site yet. We
No.
will one day.
Yeah, well,
But let us know in the comments
in the comments.
wherever
Yeah.
you see or read this or listen to it. You're not going to read this. That'd be weird.
And then also, if you have any questions about intermittent fasting, let us
Mhm.
know.
Cool.
Maybe we can have some. But yeah.
All right. Well, with that being said, boom. Catch you guys next time.
See you later.
Peace.